Microphones. Hi, everyone. How are you doing tonight? I'm Ayana. I'm the event production coordinator at the Center for Fiction. For those of you who don't know us, we're the only literary nonprofit that focuses on the creation and enjoyment of fiction. Yes, yes, fiction. Um, so, by show of hands, I'm curious how many of you are joining us for the first time? Oh, awesome. Yay. Welcome. We're super excited to have you here. We're also excited to have the people that have been here before here. While I'm up here, I just wanted to make a little announcement that there are tickets available for our first novel fete, which, if you don't know, it's a really fun party that happens on December 2nd. It's a celebration of our first novel prize finalists, so they're readings from them, and there's an open bar, and there's tarot readings, and lots of fun, exciting things. So check out our website to learn a little bit more about that. And so welcome to you all here. Welcome to those of you on the live stream. And a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. We'll have a Q&A tonight, and if you're here, we'll ask you to raise your hand, and one of our fabulous interns will bring a microphone to you, and make sure you speak into it so that the guests watching on the live stream can hear you. And if you're watching via YouTube, you can type your questions in the chat at any time. And now on to our guests. Igiaba Scego was born in Rome in 1974 to a family of Somali ancestry. She holds a PhD in education on post-colonial subjects and has done extensive academic work in Italy and around the world. Her memoir, La mia casa e dove sono, won Italy's prestigious Mondello Prize. She's a frequent contributor to the magazine Internazionale and to Il Venerdì di Repubblica, a supplement to La Repubblica. Ayana Mathis' first novel, The 12 Tribes of Hattie, was a New York Times bestseller, a 2013 New York Times notable book, an NPR Best Book of 2013, and a second selection for Oprah's Book Club 2.0, and was longlisted for the Dublin Literary Award and nominated for Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy Award. Mathis's nonfiction has been published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, the Financial Times, Rolling Stone, and Glamour. Her work has been supported by the New York Public Library's Cullman Center, Svitella's Ranieri Foundation, and the Bogliasco Foundation. She is a 2020 to 2021 American Academy and Berlin Prize Fellow. Mathis received her MFA at the Iowa Writers Workshop. She currently teaches at Hunter College's MFA program. Her second novel, The Unsettled, will be published in 2023. Welcome to you both.
Been weird. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure. You all were kept waiting because I live very far uptown, and the trains were unkind to me in really dire ways.
Yeah, sometimes the train is not easy.
Is
Rome is the same.
yeah, exactly. You know. So today it's such an honor to meet you and to be here in conversation with you. And I guess, unless there's something you sort of wanted to say to sort of start things off, I guess we should start right in so that we have enough time for questions afterwards.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you because the last time that I stayed here in New York is a little bit before pandemic, in 2019, November 2019 in Brooklyn. So, you know, I'm so happy to be here. And with this, okay. You hear me? No.
If you take out the mic pack.
No, not that one. I think the one in your pocket.
Okay. Out of the pocket. Okay, sorry, but technical problem always happen, and I'm so happy to be here with this book because it's about Afro-American woman that came in Italy in 19th century, and I create this fictional character from the real historical figure two real historical figures. One is Edmonia Lewis, and today in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I saw for the first time her sculpture, Forever Free.
Ah.
Yeah, because I don't expect to see her there, because I know that all her works stay in Washington D.C. And I see there and say, oh my God, Edmonia. And I passed 3 years to study Edmonia Lewis' life, so biography, and this is amazing. And the other woman that I based my fictional character, LaFanu Brown, was Sarah Parker Remon, was an abolitionist and activist, and Italy became a midwife. Of course, use Afro-American character is not cultural appropriation for me, because for me this character is LaFanu Brown is a bridge to understand my Afro-European identity, and is a bridge to understand Europe, what happened to Europe, and you know, Europe sometimes thinking herself as an innocent above Italy, and you know, James Baldwin always say innocence was a crime. And this book is about the innocence that Europe don't have at all. And this is, for me, so important. And I use Afro-American character because in my life, I use, not only me, but all the Black Italians, and I think Black Europeans, we create our language because of African American. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Bell Hooks, Angela Davis. But we understand that we need our own language too. So it's a kind of, you know, a movement that I do with this book.
Thank you. That gives us a wonderful overview and a sort of place to start. I don't know how many folks have already read the book. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding, so that's really wonderful. So I guess I wanted to start. In some ways, you kind of answered some of the questions. One of the questions that I had, but I think we can still kind of talk about the origins of this novel. I mean, the title, of course, is from Frederick Douglass's essay, and then later used by W.E.B. Du Bois. And then, but I just sort of wanted to ask what the kind of sparks or ideas were for you that kind of set this novel in motion in your mind.
Yeah, of course, there is something really tragic and important to me is what happened in Europe, between Europe and Africa. And you know, in the Mediterranean, in that moment, a lot of African people dying without help. And this book is divided into, and one part is, of course, a 19th century story, LaFanu Brown and her travel from United States and Italy. But the other part is about an art curator named Leila, Somali Italian like me, and she studied LaFanu Brown, and in the moment that she involved in the life of LaFanu Brown, her cousin from Somalia start Tahrib. Tahrib is the Arabic name and Somali name that mean the travel from Africa to Europe. And you know, the people, it is quite impossible if you are African to obtain a visa to Europe or elsewhere. So, and you have, if you want to go away abroad, you have to pay smugglers, and if the people, you know, these smugglers rape you or put in jail, and if you survive, you have to pay a lot of money, take a boat, and then Italy or Greece, from Greece, I don't know, you arrive in Europe with a boat. So this is quite horrible, because we here, all in this room, we have strong passport. I have Italian passport, the United States passport, and if you see the index, the passport index, the passport are so, you know, different power. our passports are so powerful. You can go everywhere. For example, Somali passport. My people, my parents are Somali, is on the bottom of the list. And this meaning no hope to go abroad. And this is so cruel because, the most of migration of African people is inside Africa. It's not outside Africa. So I speak with the young people, a lot of young people, refugee, and always they say to me, we want only our mobility as a human being, and this is the color line, because the color line is this borderland between Africa and Europe, and as is racism. For me, it's basically racism and discrimination. And of course, to explain all these things, I have two choices: to write an essay, or it's write a novel. And I write a novel, or I wrote a novel about, fictional, because it's a mirror, the travel of Lafanu Brown, and of course it's no easy travel. Black women in that time, 19th century, and for me, Binti and Lafanu in a way are the same character, but in two time different, in two different times. So this is the meaning of the title for me. And of course, I think in Du Bois, and I think in a professor in Italy, my professor in university, Alessandro Portelli, that used to have a book with this title in Italian, La linea del colore, the color line, because it's one of the first men that introduced me to African American literature. And I remember that I saw Toni Morrison because of him. Toni Morrison came in our university, and I remember her hair, gray hair, and the queen, so wonderful. And I had 20 years old, 21, 22, I don't remember. So this is a really big thing,
It's interesting you said this was actually not my question, but it sparked a question in my mind as you were talking, and you said, well, thinking about this kind of global status of migrants and people sort of trying to move from one place to place, and strong passports and weak passports and all of these kinds of things. And you said, well, I could write an essay, or I could have written a novel. And so I guess in some ways, I mean, it's a sort of weird question for a novelist to ask another one, but why the novel, right? Like, why is that the medium instead of the essay? I mean, it's sort of a weird question for us, but it's a thing I think the novelists think about. So yeah, why the novel instead of the essay?
Yeah. This is interesting question. This is tricky too, because it's not easy. Because I definitely wrote a lot of essay about migration, and articles above all in Corriere della Sera, in Internazionale, in different part in different newspapers. But I know around me, above all Italian, I see that they have something like lack of empathy in that moment. They didn't want to know what happens in the sea. This is a problem of black people. It's not our problem. We have other problems. We have bills. We have problem jobs. And these African people are a lot. Maybe they have to come back to their home, or something like that. People began to speak about a lot of things racist, and not only the fascist, even the people progressive or democratic, and I say this is something happen in the feelings of the people in my country, and not only in Italy, even in Somalia side, because this is so sad, because sometimes I speak with Somali people and they always speak about MP power and other stuff, and they don't want to talk about refugee problem. They try to forget, and this lack of empathy is something really horrible. And I think maybe a novel is good, because when you create a novel, you create a lot of feelings inside, a lot of emotion. I want to work with emotion to try to explain what happened around us. So this is basically my decision.
Yeah, I mean that sort of the ways in which we know even that, so often, obviously the
Yeah.
political situation here is not great at the moment.
No, it's not great everywhere.
But you hear all of these statistics. To people, are people swayed by just telling them a bunch of numbers, or even giving them facts?
Yeah.
And often they're not. But story does, and emotional content, as you were saying, it has such power. Narrative has such power.
Narrative power, and I think in Italy we need some popular drama on TV because we have, old population, and they always say television is a power in Italy. So maybe in one day, but I think novel is powerful too. So. It's a way to explain, above all, to the young people, not only old, what happened around them in Europe, and not only the present, even the past. The colonization, the story of Italian colonialism, for example, is so hidden, and even today, I don't remember the name of one member of our new government say, Italy was so good with Africa, and Italy really no colonize anybody in Africa.
Oh, no.
Oh my God. And I have this newspaper, this article, and say, oh my God. And of course, the people try to forget what happens in Africa, and they move the feelings of cruelty to other nation. For example, British, of course, UK was a big colonizer, France was a big colonizer, but Italy was a colonizer, and colonized my ancestor, for example, and my grandfather, my father, because my father is passed away, unfortunately, but he used to talk about Italian colonialism every time. And I remember that he said to me that he want to study, but it's quite impossible under the colonialism because you can study only 3 years. Only elementary school, and not all the elementary school, and this is horrible. They break your dream, And for that reason, I want to connect my two countries and the horrible stories between them inside my, literature, my narrative. And the color line, there is a scene at the beginning of the book about Italian colonialism. Because in general, in Italy, the people think that Italian colonialism is only fascism and Benito Mussolini, but it's not true. It's something happened before Mussolini. Mussolini was 4 years old when maybe Italy was a colonizer. So this is something that we have to have in our mind and to understand and to teach in the school. This is a problem. I don't know here in United States. I think United States is better than us, but in Italy it's quite difficult to find in a school, in a school program, Italian colonialism or or black presence or other continents, for example, and this is a big problem.
So I was thinking, kind of going back to the origins of the book and these really rich characters, La Fanu and Layla, and thinking specifically of La Fanu, I was thinking about, you were talking a little bit about how she was sort of loosely kind of based on Edmunia Lewis and on Sarah Parker Redmond. And so but this really interesting thing happens in the structure of the book for those who've read it, or those of you who have yet to have the pleasure, which I'm sure you will quite soon. There's a kind of parallel structure, right? Like there's like Layla on the one hand, and she's our kind of modern day character, and then La Fanu. And I wondered how you kind of arrived at that parallel structure. It's almost like they're in conversation with each other in a way. And so I wondered sort of how you arrived at that and how you understand its function in the book.
Yeah, this is difficult because, it's quite difficult to explain my writing process because it's something that I understand little by little, step by step. And I understand that this book began with when I saw a monument in Marino. The Four Moors in Marino, this monument saw these enslaved people in chains, and I say, oh my God, I want to do something about this monument. And this is the beginning. I know that this is the beginning. And then the two picture of, one picture of Edmonia Lewis, and I follow Edmonia Lewis' work. And then a friend of mine, Cristina Vueric. Cristina was a big friend of mine. We love Brazilian music and we speak Portuguese together. So this is, and she sent me the picture of Sarah, and she said to me, "Oh, you have to write a novel about this woman." And I say, "Oh, this is interesting," you know, this strange kind of thing. And I begin to think, you know, something woke in my mind, and I understand that I want to write something about Mediterranean refugee, because all my books is quite about refugee, because my father, my mom was a refugee. I'm a daughter of refugee, and I'm quite obsessed about the subject. And of course, I study a lot. I remember 1 year I only studied, no writing at all. And I tried to understand the life of American people in Rome in that time, 19th century, above all white American people. And of course, the Edmonia Lewis and Sarah as a black person in that kind of environment, because it's not easy, you know. You try to fled racism, but you find racism in the community abroad. So I try to understand, and I read a lot of many books about the travel of Italy. It's a tropos, you know. It's something, a type in a way of the noble and the upper class send their sons to study in Italy to improve their knowledge, you know. And it's something so usual. And there are many books about that. For example, Hawthorne, The Marble Faun, or Corinna L'Italie, Madame de Staël. And I read a lot of diaries of all women, white women. So interesting, because for white women, that period went to Italy meaning freedom. Freedom, free to the society. And many women live alone or live free sexuality. Edmonia Lewis was a lesbian, and she lived with other artists, so free, not binary. Or, you know, this is so interesting for me to understand the freedom of women. And of course, stereotypes. Not only, you know, against black. You know, there is a sentence of Harris James against Edmonia Lewis. So, and the stereotypes against Italians, because it's something that I try to show in this book, because I'm Italian too. This is, you know, I live different layers of racism as black, as Muslim, as Somali, and as Italian. So and this is quite crazy. And when I read, for example, Hawthorne or Corinna is so racist book, and Italians are always the problem, you know. And Italy is so beautiful, the ruins, the Colosseum, the churches, the Caravaggio, the Michelangelo, but oh my God, the Italians!
Full of Italians.
Full of Italians. Oh my God! And I try, and of course I saw different, you know, movies about Italy, above all American movies. Present day, It's Praying Love. Horrible one. I don't like it all, and because Italy, like, is a primitive world without hot water, so something like crazy. And there is another one, and of course the series Friends, so useful, because the two characters in Friends, as Italian character, one is Joey Tribbiani, Italian American, obsessed with food and sex, and the other one in the first season, Paolo, was a rapist. So and I tried to use all these stereotypes in the book, and this book is against racism in all the form, And as Italian, I know that the people try to stereotype my country, because it's my country. I don't like stereotypes, And as a black woman, I try to explain Somalia, because the people, what happened in Somalia few days ago, more than 100 people dying during a horrible attack, and in the Ministry of Education, and many young people die, and so sad. And the people say, this country is only war, but it's not true. The war coming because someone sell us weapon, and our neighbors. It's not so easy to manage sometimes. And Somalia is a great country with a great heart. So I want to show my two countries without stereotypes, and of course I try to criticize something that I don't like colonialism, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how they sort of the two women are very much another question that I had. I was sort of going to save it, but we've arrived at it maybe. But I mean, movement and moving is a really huge part of this book. So of course, like La Faru leaves the U.S. and she goes to Italy, and then Layla's parents. Well, Layla is of Somali origin. She's born in Italy, but her parents are not. And then there's Binti, her cousin. It's her cousin, right? Yes, her cousin,
yeah.
Who is in Somalia and makes an attempt to leave, which goes horribly. And then, of course, also in the book, Layla at a certain point goes to Mogadishu to sort of recruit and look for artists for this show. So there's so much movement there, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about kind of the role of like movement and migration in the book, because there's so much of it, and it all seems to be sort of in conversation with each other, even though it's some is happening in the 19th century and the other is happening in the more modern day.
I think movement is part of my life, more than my movement, and movement of my family, because they live all over the world. Even here in the United States, I have two brothers, one sister that live here. And after the war, after the dictatorship before, and then after the war, the Somalis spread out, and I want to show that in this book, what happened with the diaspora. And in the diaspora, sometimes you live in a place and you create a relationship with another person of your family, in Somalia, for example, but sometimes you don't know for real. You know only by phone, or
you've never actually met the
never
person.
actually met the person. Yeah, and this is quite crazy. And I want to show this with Leila and Binti, because the Leila Binti relationship is so strong. It's real. It's something real. But Leila never met Binti, and Binti never met Leila. And when Binti fled from Somalia, the first person that she called was Leila. So because something happened, and I remember after the war in 1993 or 1994, the people start to call us from many geography of Somalia, many places of Somalia, cousins, and some people that related with a clan, and tribes, because we have tribes in Somalia, and you create this relationship. You help these people because you feel that these people is our people, my people. So I want to show this kind of movement and this kind of relationship. And then, of course, movement, I think, is part of the world in that moment. And my country, Italy, is a borderland, and it's quite crazy. They don't want to accept the role that they have. They have this role to become a bridge between Europe and Africa, and Italy denied this role in that moment. But it's important to be a bridge, you know, more than a wall. Above all now, and Italy is so old country, and so, you know, you need people, you need new citizens, and you need to create this bridge for your surviving. If you want to survive, you have to become a bridge. And
and I was thinking too, in terms of on this kind of idea of movement and moving around, how much La Fanu and Leila have this other kind of parallel through. I mean, obviously, La Fanu is an artist. Leila is a curator. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, because the book spends a lot of time, I mean, it seems like one of the sort of, even though they're living in different centuries, right, and they can't actually speak to each other, of course, although it does sometimes feel, you have this element of these La Fanu's letters to Lizzie that Leila is able to read. And so it does sometimes feel, which is a lovely touch, it does sometimes feel as though La Fanu is talking to Leila, you know, which is really wonderful through these letters. But in any case, so they're both women of color, Black women in kind of, how do I even phrase this? Because I mean, obviously La Fanu is actually a foreigner, and Leila is Italian. Nonetheless, they're both in these places where people are questioning sort of who they are or where they belong by virtue of being Black. And then to add on to that, both of these women are working in the arts. And so I wondered if there was just anything that you could say about that, or if there was any way you were thinking about how these women are sort of situated in terms of nationhood and race, and then putting that both very so firmly in the context of arts, of the arts.
Yeah, I think the language of Leila and La Fanu was art, definitely. And I use for that book a lot of research that I do basically for my life, because I'm in the same question, who I am. No, you know, I know that Italy and Somalia are countries, but sometimes I feel more Roman. But what's mean be Roman? You know, Roman is quite amazing. You know, thing. You know, sometimes I so connected with the, you know, the Romans, with the Roman Empire. So this is quite strange, and this kind of question is my question, and I think this is the moment. It's not only my moment. When I saw to the Metropolitan Museum, there are many scholars, many writers, artists that try to find themselves in the art. You know, or try to create a new art. And in this book, there are many presence of Black people in art, above all in the painting, in Italian painting of Renaissance. I use Veronese, I use Carpaccio. The Black Gondolier of Carpaccio is so beautiful, and if you have time and you go to Venice, you have to see this Carpaccio painting, because it's really beautiful. And of course, the monument of slavery, and one in Livorno, the Quattro Mori, 4 Moors, and Marino one. And I'm quite obsessed, because we have all these traces of racism and discrimination, and of course we need to rename it, we rememorize, or we need a project of resignification in a way. And I try to do this resignification with my book, with my novel. It's the only way that I can do it, because it's my job, and it was linked with identity, because I'm Italian, and Italy meaning right, meaning art, and we live around art. And my neighborhood in Rome is a popular neighborhood. I live in Tor Pignatara, but around me I have the traces of a Roman Empire or Roman something Republican, and this is amazing. We are involved in art, and I want to use art as a language to explain that we are, as Black people, part of this art. Our presence is there in the main people of your Renaissance, Botticelli or Michelangelo. We stay there, and of course there is this big problem in Italy about the citizenship. Because if you are connected, your parents are migrant and you are born in Italy or raised in Italy, when you arrive, in your 18 years old, you became a foreigner in your own country without passport. Maybe you obtain the passport, but with difficulties and bureaucracy and craziness, and it's not easy passage, and sometimes you don't obtain a lot at all. I have a friend, Luca Neves, is still waiting. He's 35 years old. He's still waiting his citizenship, and he raised in Italy. When he speaks, his accent is so Roman, and it's the only place that he belongs is Rome, and no one gives to him the right that he has. So the passport, the citizenship, and they call it as a second generation, but I hate it. I'm not second generation. I'm Italian. Point. And this is important to explain. Of course, it's something related with Italy, but I think related to Europe in general, because Europe treats us as a problem always in France or in Germany or in other places. Even in UK, so this is quite a big conversation that all the Black people in Europe has with their country, and some of my friends sometimes, they give up. And they try to find another country to live, and sometimes they come back in Africa. This is interesting things that happen. I have this friend that she came back to Ghana, and because in Ghana it's as Black and normal, and sometimes we have a lot of problem to be in Europe and to stay in Europe. And I want to explain all that with the Leila, because Leila live in that book many of these dilemma all the time, above all at the beginning, when she saw for the first time the monument and no one around her understand her feelings and her moment of emotion and depression, because when you see statue is not neutral, you need resignification, because sometimes it's so painful to see another woman like you enslaved and in chain, and this moment she stayed with her friend, the mother of her friend, and even her friend didn't understand her. So this kind of problem happen all the time, and I want to show with the figure of Leila. Of course, Leila is not me, because I explained this all over the world. I'm not Leila. The name is I take the name Leila from my friend, a professor in a university. I think it's the only African heritage professor in Italian university, Leila Al-Hussein. So I take her name, and she know that. But for me, it's a metaphor of all people like me, not only Black, but people that has parents came from another countries, but they are Italians. So. Second generation, okay, I don't like it, but yeah, I use it for to explain to you. But this is a kind of metaphor of our generation.
Yeah, there's this really interesting moment, sort of toward the second half of the book, like the last quarter or third or something. And when La Fanu has left the U.S., and and she's in England, she's in the UK, and she wants to move on, and they deny her. The U.S., what now I guess would be a consulate, but at that point has a different name, but it's the same entity. Official denies her a visa to move on because he says she's not, she's half Chippewa, and then she's half hate, and they're like, well, she's not a U.S. citizen. This person is not a citizen. And so this theme of like of statehood and of belonging and of your rights as a person, it just sort of really resonates throughout the novel so richly and so beautifully. And so I'm glad that you touched on that.
For real to Sarah Parker, and it's quite interesting. Belonging is not something easy. Above all, for that generation of Black African American, that they tried to became free, to in search of freedom, and of course Sarah and Elmonia find this freedom outside. In another country, but it's not easy at all, because you want to live in your country maybe, or you want to live in a really free space, but sometimes it's not easy. And when I understand what happened to Sarah, and I think, oh my God, this is the same situation that happened to Luca Neves, all my friends, without citizenship in Italy. So our country deny us, and this is horrible. And sometimes you have passport, but even with the passport, the society deny you in a representation, for example, on television or in the movies. In U.S., in that moment, there is a moment of, after Black Lives Matter, of big representation of Black people, above all in the movie, and but in Italy, it's not that. It's so only white, and you try to see yourself in a movie or in an advertisement or in a university. In the universities, only my friend Leila and other men in Macerata with the Lucelati, and that's it. Only two, and this is scandal for me, and this is denied the population that you have, because in that moment Italy is so plural. There are people from all over the world, 195 countries, from South America to Asia, Africa, and Europe, Eastern Europe. So no one of us stay in university, in school, in politics. In politics, we have only two in that parliament. A woman that I don't remember the name, from the origin is from Tunisia, and Abubakar Suamoro is an MP. He was Italian now, but he came from Ivory Coast. So he helped workers, and and of course they treat these two people so badly, but they are so brave, because they stay there, and they are the only people that you see yourself in that moment, and this is quite difficult.
And significant for them to be there. We have very little time, so I'm going to sneak in one last question. It's wonderful. I love it when there's like suddenly no time left, because it means we've actually been talking. It's a good sign. So forgive me. I'm just like, which one will I ask?
I don't know.
I think I want to ask about one of the things, and I'm so glad you touched it, because I wanted to talk about kind of blackness and this sort of search for blackness in Italian art, and the sort of like long, kind of patrimony of Italian art. So I'm really glad we got to touch on that. The last thing I guess I want to ask, and sort of a weird place to end, but it's so interesting. I wanted to talk about patronage. Bathsheba is La Fanu's patron. Or we could say benefactress might be another word. And so there's this very interesting thing where Bathsheba seems to be both genuinely interested in La Fanu's, talent and her success, but there's also a little bit like, it's like my pet monkey, like there's also that happening. And there's an interesting parallel much later in the modern sections. The parallels between the modern and the 19th century are really interesting. And when they're trying to put this show together in Venice, and there's the character, I think her name was Daphne.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I'm totally into migrants. Like, I really love migrants. You can take
Yeah,
pictures
yeah.
of them and win awards. And so I was just interested in this notion of patronage and sort of how it plays out in the book.
Patronage and white saviorism. Yeah, because I always see all the time, you know, because there are, in my country, there are, of course, problems, racism and fascist and so on. But on the other hand, we have many people from, you know, with good you know, way to live, and they want to save the world and to save migrants above all, but still they are racist. So this is kind of, you know, above all, the left wing of my country has a lot of problem with racism and don't want to face it. And I add all this kind of patronage thing from that kind of behavior that I see around me a lot. And above all with migrants, because many people try to sail with a boat that save migrants, but with the photo opportunity. You know, and this is quite, you know, crazy. And of course, art use a lot migrant tragedy in a bad way to make money, and this is not so good. You know, you need to explain what happened in the Mediterranean. But when I see this navy in the Biennale di Venezia, it's a really navy that, you know, the people die there. And the navy stay in the front of the coffee bar, and the people stay, take coffee and sandwiches in front of the navy. And for me, this navy is a grave, you know, and something really terrible happened there. So it's quite, for me, it's quite impossible that you take a coffee and drink and laugh in front of the grave. And this is kind of things I don't like it at all. And I want to add this. And of course, when I create my white character in this book, of course, it's not only white savior. So there are different layers of patronage, or even different layers of whitening, you know, white woman is so different, because this is a book about conversation between black and white in a way, and of course is a space between them, and someone understand and someone take it time to understand. Above all, Betsy, they understand very late. But I want to show, you know, sometimes the bad condition of women, even white women, above all, in that time. And many of these characters, no spoiler this, but they are widows. And this is interesting, because widow be widow, meaning in that time be free.
Be free.
Yeah, and this is quite weird, you know, but it's true, you know, and this happened in Somalia too, because I know many women that became free when they became widows. So I try to understand the condition of 19th century women, and I study a lot, for example, menstruation, because I have only, you know, I want to understand their body and dress. You know, dress is something that cost me a lot to write this book, because you know, the fashion changed in the 10 years. You know, this book beginning in 18, of course, the past 1859 until 1887, and this meaning dresses, many dresses, change fashion. And you know, in 1870 they use, you know, a skinny dress, and then other kind of dress. So I study a lot, and I know this is something. And I have 1 minute. I want to use this minute to say that above all, 19th century and black woman was something that I have to search a lot. You know, and I'm And I use a lot of images of African American women that I try in archives because I want to understand what kind of dress, what kind of gesture. It's not easy because it's now, of course, Bridgerton, and we have a lot of material. But and when I began to write this book, I have no idea about black women in 19th century and real women of 19th century. And of course, I used this cover, the same Italian cover, with this artist, amazing artist, Ayana Jackson, and because I want to show, a work of the artist, but in a way, my research of dressing, and it's something really important when you write historical novel. You have to understand any kind of things: menstruation, dress, menopause. Menopause is something inside in that book. Because of course I don't write menopause, but I want to write, but I don't, because I think in 19th century they don't talk about menopause at all. No. But of course many of my characters stay in that kind of thing. Above all Betsy Bia, but La Fanu in the Italian part of her life. So it's quite important to understand what happened to the body of the women, and I try to understand the bodies when I write. Always when I write the novels or even one short story, it's important to understand the body of your character.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, because they do feel. It's funny that you're saying that, because you do feel like you're really kind of inside the bodies and inhabiting these women.
Yeah, and behaviors.
Yeah, and
craziness.
I'm glad you addressed this thing about research, and then I'll shut up and we'll take questions. I'm so glad you addressed this thing about research, because I've always we ask people about research. Whenever people write a historical novel, they're like, "I like your research," and it's kind of like, oh. But so I didn't ask, but I'm glad you brought it up anyway, because it's actually really interesting, But just thinking about how difficult it would be to find, in the 19th century in the West, everyone's white.
Yeah.
Right, like that's the image, right? Like the bodices, the dresses, the men, every image in the public imaginations, they're all white.
Yeah, no, but the hair of African American women in 19th century was so interesting. It's so curly, or for example, many women cut their hair. So I love this woman really, because it helped me to write a book.
Yeah. That is a wonderful place to end, I think, and open up for questions. Thank you so much for having this lovely conversation.
So we have time for a couple of questions. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and Morgan will bring a microphone over to you.
Thank you. The nowadays part of the color line is set in Italy in 2019, I guess. Do you think it would have been a different kind of writing or a different part if you wrote this book something like 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Oh my God, I don't know really, because my career began 20 years ago. So when I start to write about my identity as a Muslim and Italian and Somali. I don't know really. I think it's a moment in the narrative, a big moment. Not only my novel, but I seen several novels in US, in Brazil, in UK about what happened before colonialism, 19th century, 18th century, and I think we are all in conversation because literature is a big conversation in a way. I remember a Brazilian book. I don't remember the author. It's about a enslaved woman in a plantation in Brazil, and I love the title, Difeito da Cor. How do you call difetto? I'm sorry. Difetto di colore. Difetto di colore.
The color, like the color, the fault of color.
The fault of color, yeah. And I remember this woman in 19th century, so powerful and really amazing, you know. And I think we are in conversation because I see several novels. And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, many black writers stay in other research, I think, you know, and because, for example, about colonialism, I understand many things from Africa. Above all South America and then Africa. Chinua Achebe, of course, Tsitsi Dangarengba. I remember when the first time I read Nervous Condition by Tsitsi Dangarengba, I say, oh my God, she speak about my life and about my family. It's Zimbabwe, not Somalia, but something, you know, related with my life too. And I think 15 years ago, people like me stay in another, you know, study these people. I don't know, maybe, yeah, now we can write it, but in that time we stay. I began to read all kind of African novel and South American novels. Yeah, they helped me a lot. Jorge Amado and yeah. The fault of color. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed hearing you speak, and I especially enjoyed hearing about how all the research you did informed like the novel that you ended up creating for us and for yourself. I was wondering if you could explain one more time how researching African American and African American women informed the characters you developed or the setting that you developed in the novel. I was wondering if you could touch on that one more time.
When I create this character, so I think that I answered the question, but I tried to repeat that. I think I use African American character because I need, you know, as an African European, for a long time, I see this world of African American, and it's so amazing for me because I live a lot of racism thing when I was child and teenager at school, and I have no language. Of course, I have my parents. My mom always, you know, explain me things. You have history behind you. You have Somalia and so on. But I need something more sometimes, and I need, you know, courage to do things, to dream, and to create my own life and my own language and my own body in a way. You know, I remember when I was teenager, I used to curve my shoulders every time because, you know, you live with this heavy of racism. It's a squat, and your body racism change your body. And I remember that I'm always stay in trouble. I stay in trouble for many reasons, not only racism, but yeah, of course, the Civil War, and you know, and my next book is about Civil War, and I finished this book, and it will be published in February. But you know, in this moment I found Malcolm X, and this is so important for me to understand myself, and you know, and then the others, you know, and of course the language that African American give to me is a big step. But I understand then that I need to create my own language. It's not only, you know, my thing, but I think all the African Europeans. And then when I begin to write, I try to show the African Europeans history or the connection between my two countries, because before the color line I wrote Adwa is about Italian colonialism, Beyond Babylon about violence, colonial violence nowadays on the body of migrant and second generation. So it's quite, my books is it's a conversation because you know, the topic is not the same book, but the same violence. because we stay in that environment, and of course in the structure of the novel came from that, because I always I need, as a Somali, because I'm two, you know, as Italian, I'm Italian and I'm Somali. As Somali, I need someone that hear my story, because we have oral literature, it's not written, you know. And in Adwa, for example, the main character talk with an elephant, but it's not real elephant, it's a marble elephant by Bernini in the square of Rome, you know. It's this conversation with the marble, and it's a conversation with the city, basically. And here is the conversation of characters, in a way, you know. I divided, and the chapter of the book, one Lafanu, one Leila. And Leila and Lafanu is in conversation together, because conversation for me is so important. I always try to tell the story to somebody, and it's not. I'm not so European. That I'm so African. You know, I need somebody to tell and to share my experience, and maybe to hear their experience or hear his experience. Yeah.
We have one more. I think this woman had her hand. This woman in front was.
I just want to ask you, what made you decide to put Frederick Douglass in the story, and why did you change him
Okay.
that way?
Okay, it's not Frederick Douglass, but
Well, it
it
is.
look like Frederick Douglass. No, because I want to create a character of. There are only two men in this book. One Italian and one African American, and of course African American look like Frederick Douglass, but it's not. But it's important that I say that, because I want to. But when you think 19th century, you think in Frederick Douglass, and of course there is something historical. He came in Rome with his wife, and Edmonia show. The city, and you know, this is quite strange for me, you know, all the people that I care in that moment stay together, and it's so funny if you read the Frederick Douglass when he arrived in Rome and describe you know, this marble St. Peter inside the Vatican, and he say, oh my God, they kiss the foot of Black St. Peter. You know, this is quite interesting. And yeah, I add this character because of Frederick Douglass came in Italy, and because I want to add strong male character here in the book. Yeah.
And
And the other things is I want to show a love story between two blacks, because it's something that in Italian literature doesn't exist. It exists only rape against black women. And of course, wonderful novel, but Tempo di uccidere, Time to Kill, to Ennio Flaiano, and other things like that. And I want to show only, you know, two black people love each other, and yeah, with difficulties of, you know, the couple has difficulties in general, but I want to show love, you know. Love is something, sometimes is, Angela Davis said that when enslaved, after the slavery, women and men discover love and sex, black women and black men, because before it's something that the plantation was denied by the owners, and love and sex is something really important to show. Yeah.
And our final question from Zoom, from Zane, who says, ciao from Bergamo, is a question for Dr. Scego. How is the process of writing this book different from your previous novels?
Okay. I study a lot, I think, because about you know, the other novel, I knew the story of colonialism, Italian colonialism in Somalia by heart. You know, family and my father, my mom. I study a lot colonialism in my PhD. Angelo Del Boca is the famous historian in Italy that wrote several volumes about that. You know, and it's something that I know. But for that novel, I study more, because I explained before, I need to understand the body of a woman of 19th century and what happened in the American community in Rome, art, sculpture, you know, it's just, and the process of writing is quite the same for me. I need a coffee, decaf, because I can't drink coffee anymore like before, but decaf or tea, and I usually wrote in the kitchen. Because my kitchen is wonderful. It's small, but I love to write in the kitchen. And then, but the only difference is I went to the library of my neighborhood because I found several books about travel in Rome. They're so helpful, and all librarians helped me a lot. And at the end of the book, I say thank you to my neighborhood library because because they helped me a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely. Thank you for talking with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for this fantastic conversation. Thank you all for being here. The bookstore and the cafe will be open for a few minutes. Everyone should buy The Color Line and buy it for all of your friends and family. And have a wonderful night.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Can I steal your microphone?